Hello, 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 and welcome everyone to the Innocent Lives Foundation Fireside Chat for August. We have a very, very cool fireside chat tonight with two awesome guests, which we are calling the Kevins here on our team side. We've got both Kevin Metcalf as well as Kevin, I'm probably going to butcher this, Branzetti. Hopefully I didn't do too bad. All right, I got a thumbs up. They are both members of NCPTF, or the National Child Protection Task Force. Kevin is the president, and Kevin B is the VP. So we are going to hand it over to them, and let's start with Kevin Metcalf. Could you give us a quick introduction, and then we'll turn it over to Kevin B.
That is one of the joys of doing this from here live. I have been in one uniform or another since 1988. So I went through basic training in the Army, and I've worked in law enforcement, including federal law enforcement, so state, local, and federal, up until about 2007 when I went to law school, which I would not ever recommend and would never do again. Became a prosecuting attorney. I've been doing that about 11 years now. So I've got a little over 30 years in law enforcement, military, and everything else.
Wow, and that is impressive. Thank you.
I'm here in Northwest Arkansas. You're going to tell there's a difference. The only way you can tell us apart is really the accent. One of us has an accent and I don't. So
yeah, I think that might be the only distinguishing feature. I don't know about any sort of facial hair, glasses, hair in general. No, just the accent.
We even decided to dress the same for tonight.
Yeah, I see that. So Kevin Branzetti, could you give us an introduction, who you are, a bit of your history?
Hey, how are you? Good evening. Kevin, the other Kevin. I'm retired NYPD. Amongst other things, I did my last bunch of years with doing counterterrorism investigations. My last 6 was running the cyber intelligence unit. Almost 6 years ago, I left NYPD to go over to the Manhattan DA's office where I work now. My title is Chief of Intelligence, which means I have a cool title, lousy pay. I work for government, but you know, that's life. 3.5 years ago, I met Kevin Metcalf at a conference in Boston, and he kind of, I don't know, changed my life or screwed up my life. I'm confused at times on which way to go with that one. But we met, we realized we had a common thoughts and goals of life, and that's where the NCPTF started off. That conference was really the beginning stages of it.
That's fantastic. So what exactly is NCPTF?
Well, it's Shane, you're not going to outdo me. All right. So
she was just really misbehaving. So
yeah,
didn't have a choice.
The NCPTF, this was formed out of what I saw as a need. So after, about 3 decades of working in this realm on the investigation side and seeing how technology was shaping that landscape, and it's so incredibly difficult for investigators to keep up. There's a lot to do anyway, but so the NCPTF started as a way of reinvesting the experience that was gained. And it's not just in Arkansas, but New York State, there are a lot of very, very small agencies. There are somewhere around 18,000 different jurisdictions in the United States.
Holy cow.
And yeah, and there is no common theme really. So each one of them is their own little kingdom, as Branzetti likes to refer to them. And that's exactly what they are. They do things their own way. But I personally think working a missing child is one of the most difficult things you can do. Doesn't matter if it's terrorism, homicides, whatever you've got, working a missing child can be incredibly, incredibly difficult. However, the missing child investigators are some of the least funded, least trained, and most neglected group of people. They have this huge burden and very little help with it. So a few years ago, I started teaching cell phone investigations across the country, and everywhere I'd go, I'd say, if you need help, let me know. And we still do that, and it's why we get so many cases coming in. But the more places I helped, the more I was exposed to different ways of doing things, and I started building this up. And one of the things I did learn in law school is how to make an outline. So I keep notes and keep an outline. So I actually formed a lot of those, which turned into books for working with cellular, call detail records. But anyway, this expertise came in handy, and I helped recover a few kids that were taken by online sexual predators a few years ago. That got national attention, and that got me invited to speak at the National Cybercrime Conference among different ones, and that's where Kevin was talking about, where I met him. I was presenting there on some of the stuff I was doing, and Branzetti and I started talking and collaborating more, and we started, the more we would work, the more we figured out, well, we don't know this chunk over here. So we find somebody, usually at these national conferences, that would fill in that area, fill in that gap. So we've ended up with a huge selection of law enforcement and private technology professionals and experts in a lot of different fields. So
yes, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, huh?
Yeah, and actually that's where I heard about Chris and the ILF was during this. Actually, it was at Black Hat. I think I ran across one of the guys up there because I'd started going into Black Hat and DEF CON to make connections and to start meeting people, some of whom don't really trust the government very much. But
imagine that.
Yeah, I wonder what.
Yeah, imagine that. So anyway, and Branzetti's got his own take here on what the NCPTF is, but it's actually a crowdsourced way of working investigations, I think.
That's amazing. That's incredible. Yeah. Anything else to add, Branzetti?
I mean, yeah, sure. The quick answer is we're a free resource for law enforcement, but when they're stuck, right? And it's not that Kevin and I are the smartest person in the room, or we're going to solve everybody's case. We're not. But what we have is a large network of friends that we just keep bringing in more and more. We keep going out to places, meeting more and more people, and we learn. We're learning. We are very similar with Kevin and I are very good at learning, taking notes, and then share it. And so that's it. With that, phone a friend for law enforcement when they're stuck.
That's great. I love that. And there's more and more resources, it seems, like that are being born out of a recognized need, which is great. I mean, that's what needs to happen, right? So
hey, you guys need phone a friend for law enforcement on your t-shirts. That's good.
That is good. So, Kevin, you made mention that working a missing child case was one of the hardest things that you can do. Did you mean that like emotionally, or did you mean just actually functionally speaking, it's difficult to do?
Functionally speaking, sometimes, and we'll get in on my soapbox of missing versus runaway versus foster kids and these kids, the tribal children. But sometimes parents can't. We've told parents over the years that you need to control that device, control what happens on that device, know all your kids' accounts, know what they're doing on those accounts, which has led to parents putting spyware on phones and taking phones and looking through all the messages and searching. And I'm not saying there's a cookie cutter, or a blanket answer here, but when you get up to a kid who's 13, 14, 15 years old or more, 16 or 17, and you're still taking their phone and looking through it and having spyware on that, that's where the burner devices come in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the parents don't know. They don't know who they're talking to. They don't know what accounts are over there. All they know is suddenly their kid's gone. Yeah. They don't know where they're at. And how do you start an investigation off of that?
Right.
You don't know where the accounts are. You don't know who the kid's been talking to. All you know is that the kid was here one day and gone the next. And an investigation like that, where you don't really have a place to get a foothold or a starting point, can be, it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So we like to describe ourselves as predator identification as a service, almost like you mentioned, phone a friend, right? And so how does NCPTF and the Innocent Lives Foundation, how do they differ? Because we're fairly similar organizations with a focus on helping children, but where do we differ?
Kevin, you want to?
Sure. I mean, the quick answer, proactive, reactive, would be definitely the one. You guys are out looking for predators beforehand. We're looking for them after we know she or he has already gone missing.
Very fair. That makes a lot of sense. So I guess that leads to the next question then. So if someone is aware of a child that is being harmed or perhaps trafficked or is missing, when should they come to NCPTF and when should they come to the Innocent Lives Foundation?
I'll give you my answer. If my child is missing, I'm coming to you and us, and I'm going to everybody. Yeah. You guys have strengths that we don't, and vice versa. You know, one of our strengths is legal process. We know what language to use. We know what, do you need a subpoena, a D order? Do you need a search warrant, a Title III warrant? That's the kind of stuff we specialize in, and we can do it rapidly. So when you have that aspect, and we can generate a lot of data points, a lot of these identifiers. And you guys know what I'm talking about. We can generate those incredibly fast, and we can start finding the connecting points. But you need to be able to take a deep dive down each one of those. So if we came up on a really big case and we start looking at all these predators, because each child usually has multiple predators attached, and each of those predators will be attached to multiple other children, and it just spider webs out. When we're chasing somebody down that rabbit hole, we're chasing that predator. We're looking at a very pinpoint precision targeting. We're going to find that person. We're going to find that child. But what about all this other stuff out here? That's where you guys can come in, and we say, hey, can you guys start taking a look and see what you can find on these? Because we don't have time.
That is great. I love that answer. Yeah, why not both, right?
Absolutely. That's where we should be going.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, so for everybody listening, you may or may not know this, but the ILF and the NCPTF have collaborated before on cases, and definitely will be happening again. But I think it's great, especially to have the opportunity to have conversations like this, to expand and cross promote, so people are aware that there's other groups out there that are doing fantastic things. And as a matter of fact, in the chat, if anyone wants to learn more about the NCPTF, see what they do, and go donate to these guys, type an ! guest, and you'll see a breakdown of information and a link to their site. That's awesome. Well, thank you guys for being here, and I'm just looking forward to having a chat. I need to get myself some whiskey. I don't know about y'all, but I'm going to make that happen real fast. What are you guys drinking tonight?
Yeah, I'm in the water section right now.
Man, you're drinking Red Bull at 7:13. Do you plan on sleeping?
Yeah, Mandy.
Apparently not. I didn't tell time very well, and it started at 5. So I just decided to follow through on it.
Oh my God, at least you're committed.
The first ingredient is water.
Or should be.
So I'm hydrating.
The first ingredient is water.
I mean, it's carbonated water, but so that's just sparkling water in different words, right?
My heart would race all night long. I don't know how you do that.
I'm being fancy.
I have a question for you guys, for the Kevins. Just like our website has a report a case right on it, do you guys have an option right on your website? Like if a parent did want to reach out to you guys, what's the best way for them to get to you?
Well, and actually Chris and I have had this discussion a few times, and actually started off with something we were both aware of, that we have to be really cautious. You know, for you guys, you're using open source and digging deep. We go into extremely sensitive law enforcement only tools that, you know, that can be, of course, privacy is a big issue. We have to have a law enforcement investigator. We got to have an agency with jurisdiction over that case. That's where we require.
That makes sense. So it already has to be somewhat of an open, established case in a specific jurisdiction, and then the parent could reach out to you after that fact?
Yeah, because we found that in some cases, the parents are the abusers. And we actually had one who reached out trying to get help. And as we started digging, we were talking to, I don't want to go into too much detail, talking to a service provider. And they were saying, I'm looking at these conversations, and it looks like the dad has been the abuser in this. And so that immediately switched how we were doing it. So we shut down all communication with that father and reported everything that we had to law enforcement. And that's the reason we have to have a law enforcement connection that can see what's going on.
That makes sense. A third party, kind of neutral. Absolutely.
And Kevin, you may have more on that.
Yeah, I mean, we would listen to, if a parent contacted us, we're going to listen to them, and we're going to help them, point them in the right direction. Maybe we'll connect them to somebody at a law enforcement agency we know to get that ball rolling, right? We're not going to just say, call us later kind of thing, right? We're going to get them, somewhere. And we have helped parents with communicating with law enforcement, and we will help them with tips on things that can be done and stuff. But it really is, in the end, we want that parent to ask the law enforcement agency if they don't mind an introduction.
That's great.
We'll work it from there.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
and then I know Kevin Metcalf, you mentioned earlier, and it really struck a chord with me because I worked with teenagers for years. You had mentioned there's such a big difference between a missing child, like gone missing, versus a child who runs away versus a child. And I didn't even think in that realm how there are many children that just go missing because they left willingly. And that makes probably a very big difference in terms of you guys kind of investigating.
Yeah, so you guys are well aware of the collaborative manuals that are kept on the dark web on how to avoid prosecution, how to avoid detection. So let's take a couple of steps back. And I'm not saying kidnappings don't happen, that the guys in the white van don't pull up in front of the mall and grab your kids and take off. I'm sure that does happen here and there, but for the most part, that's going to alert the National Guard, the FBI. You're going to have helicopters flying over I don't know where we were at, Kevin, but helicopters flying over, all of this stuff, all of this activity. Or you can groom that child. You can start developing that illusion of trust. And you can start developing that relationship. You can start isolating them from parents, isolating them from friends, getting to where, and they exploit those vulnerabilities, eating disorder, runaway, suicidal ideation, depression, whatever it may be. They exploit those gaps to make them run away. Now, if you will Google search your jurisdiction and let's say New York, runaway, and see what your local jurisdiction has to say about runaways. Nationwide, pretty much, it's not considered a crime. And the responsibility for recovering that child falls upon the parent or guardian. Now, what does that mean in foster care? Or what does that mean for a child who grew up on a reservation? It means that not much is going to happen, and that child is just out there. So
good Lord. I didn't even thought about that.
Yeah,
that's awful. No, that's good points, because like I said, we would have kids go missing for a few days in the schools I worked in, and same kind of concept. It was a hands-off, well, hopefully they resurface type situation where we would think that normally everybody runs, like you said, bells and whistles goes off, but not always. Not when they're usually a certain age, certain areas. I was in the Pocono area, which is a huge transient place right from New York down to Philadelphia and all along the highways. And so these kids would go missing, and we would pray they were just at a friend's close by, but they easily could be anywhere on the highways. So
I hate to interrupt because this is very fascinating, but something was brought to my attention. I have to apologize to our listeners. I dropped the ball. I just made the assumption that people tune in because they already know who the ILF is, but that's not true. We've got friends here from NCPTF, so I owe you guys a brief explanation on who the ILF is and who we are, don't I? So the Innocent Lives Foundation is a predator identification service, essentially. You can think of it exactly like that, predator identification as a service. Our mission statement is to identify child predators on the internet and help bring them to justice. So we're a non-vigilante group that works very closely with law enforcement to accomplish this. So joined from the ILF side tonight, we have Mandy. Can you give us a brief introduction as to what you do here?
I am the senior team leader. Yeah. I was like, that sounded weird.
That's it?
That's it. What does it mean? Yes. I lead the education and outreach department as well as the software development team. So those are my roles here at ILF.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Chris gave us some new titles over the weekend. I think your new official, unofficial title is Cat Herder, which I really like. Erin, what about you?
I am the Director of Wellness. ILF is awesome in recognizing from the very beginning that they wanted a mental health component to their program. So I am the basic therapist for the entire group, for the volunteers, and I do wellness sessions with them at least monthly. And, a couple other things here and there, some blogs and assessments and whatnot. That's my role.
I love it. Yeah, Erin is humble, but she's the glue that keeps us together here. And Shane, what about you?
My title is COO, and I'm responsible to run all the day-to-day business. So whatever that might look like or entail, ultimately it's going to end up on my desk at some point. So that's just running a business is what we're doing.
Why isn't your title cat herder? I feel like that would be yours.
I think we could all probably fit that title, to be perfectly honest. But yeah.
Yeah, my name is John McCombs. I'm the executive assistant to the Innocent Lives Foundation. But the alternate title that I was given over the weekend was Hat Rack. Because the reality is, any sort of hat that gets put on, I wear. And that's really true for all of us here. We're a small team still, as far as employees go. We have many volunteers, which is wonderful. But with a small core employee team, everyone ends up wearing a lot of hats. So.
Yeah, I wanted to bring out too. This was touched on, and I wanted to be sure that there was no confusion with anyone listening. If you need to report a case to either of us, you can report to either of us. And if you report to the ILF and it should go to the NCPTF, we're sending it to them, and vice versa. If you report a case to NCPTF and it's a better fit for the ILF, they will hand it off to us. And so that's we don't want you struggling trying to figure out where to go. Just get it in. We'll help behind the scenes.
Yeah, shout it from the rooftops. We'll get it where it needs to go.
Yeah, we still see a lot of jurisdictional issues and ego and all this other stuff. And the truth is there's more than enough to go around. It's sad to say. We shouldn't be fighting over these things. We should be collaborating and moving together in the same direction.
Yeah, and that's one of the other similarities between our two groups is neither group wants credit for what we do. So we're not out there trying to rack up points. We're not trying to do anything. We want these kids safe, and that's the ultimate goal. Sorry, John Mitchell, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. There was a question I had from earlier for the Kevins, which was you'd mentioned there's thousands of different jurisdictions in the nation, which is honestly mind-boggling to me because I don't comprehend how that even functions. How difficult is that with what you guys do to work with?
Does it function?
Yeah.
How is it? It's a hit and miss. There are some jurisdictions are great and it's easy to work with. Some aren't. 18,000 jurisdictions plus 800,000 plus members of law enforcement. The actuality is nobody knows the exact number. That's how bad our system is in this country. And there is no universal training. There is no standardized investigative training for law enforcement across the country. And on top of that, technology, which changes constantly, right? It was easy 25 years ago, 30 years ago. You could teach the same course for the last 40 years on how to investigate something. The only changes were DNA and DNA, right? Like 40 years, right? That's it. So the techniques of surveillance, interviews, interrogations, it's been passed down from generation to generation of law enforcement. It's well known. Today, it's technology. We need to track people. And, I worked for the biggest police department in the country. We couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
How is anybody supposed to keep up? And the way you could do it, crowdsource. You got to have friends.
Yeah, that's a great point. Shane and I both came from corporate IT before coming into the Innocent Lives Foundation, and it was difficult from a corporation of 80 people to just keep up with what was new in technology. I can't even imagine from a law enforcement perspective, especially with the limited budget.
Was it a matter of like trying to keep up with specific sets of software? Like a new company would come out with something every year, or was it literally just now we can do this because technology has updated in general and now we're creating our own thing, or what?
All of the above.
Yes.
Right? So I'll give you one example, right? Just how has this changed in the last year? So tracking somebody on this device, how many apps are on there this year? So if your kid is using a new app, who knows how it works? What are the ways you can track it? If they figured out how to use a VPN or some other thing to hide them, who knows how to track that? For every layer of somebody wanting to hide data on the internet, there's another layer of us trying to find it. So there's that, constant battle. And John, and the IT world is that world, right? We're trying to do what the IT world does with no
lives
budget.
at stake.
With no
And
budget,
no budget.
nobody teaching you, nobody realizing there's an issue. You know, most police departments, we could take a sample, and I'm confident as if we just pull out 10 police departments or 10 prosecutors' offices and pull their Google search warrants, those 10 will not match. I don't care what 10 you pick. And then what that means is each one of those departments is missing something they could have asked for, but they didn't realize that this one item might be the key to finding that missing kid or to finding that predator.
Yeah.
So obviously crowdsourcing. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to comment. There's a comment on there that says, when I worked with Ellie in Denmark, I returned with a great appreciation for the regulated and across the board basic training for Ellie that all had to go through before specializing, so that the baseline across the country was the same standard. Is there any hope for that here? Or do we have too many little kingdoms and fiefdoms setting out here and people wanting to keep their little power? No comment?
There's too many egos. There's too many opinions out here. And that was one of the original problems of why we set this up the way we did. And yeah, there are just too many. You're not going to have I don't think you're going to have a standard here in the US. And trying to keep up with technology, it's not just what's a new platform out here? What are the kids doing now? Did Facebook change? Did Instagram? Did Google? Did somebody change something, the way they did something? Did they get hit with the privacy, this big lawsuits? And now they're not doing this. They're not collecting this. That change needs to be reflected on your search warrants, on your legal process. And I can't get into specific details, but some of the stuff we get back is very, very specific. You really got to know what to ask for and then what to do with it when you get it back. And that's where our collaboration with some of these platform engineers and private technology people really pay off. When we get into brainstorming, we can say, we're seeing this situation play out. We can't get a foothold anywhere. We can't figure out who this is. What are we missing? The private technology connection is just, this is their realm. They know how to follow that digital trail through the technology, and they're lifesaver.
To kind of go into how hard and difficult this is. So we explain that just asking for this stuff is difficult. Getting it is a whole nother set of problems. Once you get the data, you need engineers at times to just read it, right? The tech companies don't give us a glossary and say, here's what this means, here's what this does. Each tech company calls the same darn thing a different thing. And they change. So you sit there and you get all these results, pages and pages of results, and you scratch your head going, well, what is this?
What's it mean?
What does this mean? You need another degree to read it. And then so you have to try to find somebody at that company to then talk to get explanations. Well, picture from the company's end. You have 1,000 investigators calling you every other day, asking you for an explanation. It doesn't work. The system just doesn't work.
So you mentioned crowdsourcing to being part of the solution. Do you think that's the entire solution, or what else do you think needs to happen moving forward?
This is a collaborative. It's not just the ILF and the NCPTF working together. It's going to be us taking the lessons we learned, putting it back on the front end, the before side of things, where we have parents, we have teachers, we got just community members, building a basic responsibility for childhood in our society. You know, even if you don't have a child, you probably know somebody that's got one, or at least you should care about, the children in your community. We got to fix this generation instead of raising up a broken generation that's going to be, they won't have a normal life. They're going to suffer. They're going to have depression. There's going to be all kinds of stuff. And we need to stop that now on the before side. On the after, we need survivor services. We need to work with them. Instead of looking at all the kids that get recovered by law enforcement, we need to go back and say, what happened to them 2 months after they were recovered? What resources are available for them? Who's helping them to reclaim their life? Or are we putting them back into a situation where they're being abused again by the parents? So sorry, Kevin, if you got something else there.
No, I mean, changing it would take a nuclear explosion. Right, because you have to revamp the whole system.
Right, because you have a system that was built to thrive within jurisdictional boundaries, and the internet erased the boundaries. And we're still playing with the old system and the old rules And we're on this, I always call it a hamster wheel of technology. Things are just changing so fast. We're running as fast as we can, and we're never getting anywhere. You know, it just continues to change. So.
Yeah, and it's not unusual for us to work with a law enforcement agency in, let's say, country A, and you have a predator in country B, and then you got a victim in country C, D, and E. And it's anywhere the internet touches, I think we should consider our jurisdiction and our responsibility to at least work that thing to a point where we can hand that off to a jurisdictional agency.
Right.
Yeah, and that's tough, right? Because especially because, as was mentioned earlier, children that are now digital natives are quite frankly just outsmarting their parents at every turn. If they want to hide something, they know how to use their phone better than their parents do. And 1 in 3 internet users is a child. So it's sort of this never-ending cycle.
Children have been doing this for generations since the beginning of time, right? It's kids' jobs to outwit their parents, right? Yeah. The stricter the parents, the more creative the kid becomes. Yep. This is not new. It's just technology took it to a different level.
Yeah, it's really funny. There's one of my buddies, his mom thought she was really ahead of the curve by putting blocks on all of software, internet accessible software. It's like all his browsers on his phone, right? Like Chrome was blocked after 10 p.m. and something else was blocked after 10 p.m. But she didn't know Snapchat had internet access. So he'd go on Snapchat and then he'd go to a news story on Snapchat, open that up, it would open its own browser and he'd go wherever he wanted from there. And it's just that sort of thing is unstoppable, right? So it's education at that point that you need, huh?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Or it's even a friend of mine, her nephew he's in his teens, and she was like, yeah, so I monitor his Instagram usage, and he has to give me the login to his Instagram in order for him to use it. And I was just like, honey, you know that he has multiple Instagrams, right? Like he's gonna have that's just a thing that the kids are doing now. Yep. Like every kid, especially if you have to log in, he's got at least 3. He's got one that the parents know about. He's got another for his girlfriend. And then he's got another one for public use, for the kids at school. We're lucky if it's just 3.
Yeah. You ever heard of Finsta, right?
Honey, you are so sweet. you think he's got one Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost impossible to outsmart them. I've learned I just have to do education with my kids. Because I'm not going to try to play their games. I can't. So the best thing to do is provide them a ton of education on what to look for and what not to do, and hope for the best and hope that you raise them so that they know good decisions versus bad decisions.
Yeah. One of the things we push a lot on is just the relationship. So put down the device and connect with your kids. Because if you spent the amount of time that we do going back through hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pages of grooming, those groomers listen. And one of the big things that you constantly see these kids saying is, my parents don't care what I want. They're not listening to me.
Absolutely.
If they have something like an eating disorder, what's that going to do to the parent? That's going to freak them out, and it's going to increase the pressure and increase the attempt at control, which is going to further that gap. And that gap is where these guys squeeze in and start that relationship building. So
you're so right.
We really need to be pushing the relationship building instead of you need to be spying on your kids all day, because that just destroys trust.
Exactly.
I don't know what the balance is, because sometimes you need that, but not all the time.
Exactly. No, I think you're absolutely right. It's a delicate balance, but I believe the relationship with the parents is key. It's so key.
Oh, hey, we just got a $50 donation. Thank you, Casey, very much. That was awesome.
Thank you. You can't beat the relationship, and it starts when they're young, right? It's hard when they're 17 to say, yes, all right, now we're going to start family dinner night. Everybody's phone's down. It starts when they're young. My
Absolutely.
Kids eat dinner every night together.
And Kevin brought this up earlier. I didn't even consider the layer of complexity that adds when you're talking about adopted children or foster kids, right? Like, how do you implement?
Have trust? Well, and they have trust issues to begin with a lot of times if they've been in the system for a long time. So that is really hard and almost impossible to outsmart them. So again, you have to build that connection.
Yeah. And my suggestion for parents, if you're gonna look, I think you have to do some monitoring for your kids, especially the early years that have a smartphone. But maybe you also want to bring in a family member, an aunt or somebody else. give them the access when your kid gets a little older. Give them the insight to, here's my daughter's ages, here's their things. You look at it for me. So this way, as the parent, you have a little bit, first of all, you don't want to see everything your kid does 24/7, right? Like,
you'll make yourself nuts. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to know what my older kids are up to all the time. Oh, no, I like to sleep at night. So having,
you would like for them to have a life at some point also, right?
I would be a full-blown drunk if I was doing that 24/7, right? Like, what else are you going to do? Have a family member who you trust be the one who looks at it. So, like, when they're talking silly things with their boyfriend or girlfriend, you can not know it and see it. But when something is important, you should get that call, right? Your sister should call you up and say, hey, you know what's on your daughter's page? Then it's time to jump in.
Yeah, and that's that delicate balance, because that trust goes both ways. You want them to trust you, but I mean, you got to trust them too. As they get older, especially, they're going to start making their own decisions.
Yeah. You have to hope that your relationships are strong enough and you educated them well enough and that you can let go a little.
But that's just using old school parenting, right? We talk about, it takes a community to raise your child. Well, when your kid 25, 30 years ago and 50 years ago went out on the street, your aunts and uncles who lived nearby were the ones watching out, and your neighbors watched out. Well, it's the same thing. Just do it on the internet. Ask the aunt or uncle to watch. Ask somebody else.
I just want to acknowledge we just had another $100 donation come in. Thank you so much, Joelle. That is awesome. I also love, if you noticed, we've got this really hysterical GIF or GIF, if you're one of those people, of Chris clapping like a lunatic up in the corner. So if anyone hasn't seen it, I think if you follow, it does that too, which is free, because you should trigger that because it's absolutely hysterical. Watch out for it in the upper right next time it pops up. Thank you very much, Joelle. So I'm going to put Aaron on the spot here completely.
Nice.
Yeah.
That face.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, no.
That's a micro expression training thing, just
there's no micro about it.
It was all macro right there.
Yeah.
That was pure delight, I think, is what that was. I haven't taken the training yet, but I'm pretty sure that was it.
Yeah. So use my words here for a moment. From a wellness, from a therapy background, it was brought up earlier that there's not enough resources. There's not enough time spent with these victims once they become survivors.
Yeah.
And what do you think a potential solution, or how do you think that needs to get fixed going forward?
Well, it's funny you mention this because I am working on a resource document for what happens after the trauma. And so obviously the huge thing is safety. And when I say that, safety for the child is top priority. So after an event or after this is going on, and Kevin M had mentioned this, the victim, the perpetrator could be a parent or an uncle or an aunt or somebody that has access to this child and can continue to even try to have more pull. And so safety is imminent in any situation. But the second part that is so important is to believe and validate the victim. That is so key for healing. You have to say, I believe you. I hear you. I'm here for you. That is key to validate. That is going to make or break somebody's recovery, because so many of the kids that I've worked with, when they say they don't think their parent believed them, or their parent might even have, I'm going to be honest with you, I've heard parents jealous of children's experience. You wouldn't even believe the twisted things I've heard in recovery. Oh, it's unbelievable what you might hear. And so believing the child, it seems so simple, but it is, like I said, absolutely key for that child recovering. And then even in doing the validation, the other thing is the parents want to fix things for our kids. It's very natural to want to fix something. Something goes wrong in school, you want to fix it right away. Well, sadly, this is not something you can fix. This is a process, a journey, a healing journey. So there is absolutely zero fixing this. This is like, I'm on board. We're on a bus together. You're the driver, and I'm here on the bus with you, and we will get through this journey together. So, and then, like you said, resources are key. There's therapy. A lot of times the child, the victim themselves is going to need therapy, but then you're also talking family. The family needs therapy. Parents need, a parent to know that their child was harmed in any way. You're going to need to process those feelings. And then the ongoing support. There's support groups. There are, and now with COVID, there are so many more resources for us now. actually through telehealth, especially group therapy is phenomenal through this. I mean, I personally like therapy one-on-one. I think that's a nice, like, in person, especially for a teenager. It's very important for the rapport to be kind of more in person, but group therapy can be really helpful even in this venue. So support, and it's not going to stop at a few sessions. You could have a child. I've seen children who've endured trauma, and I might see them early on in that trauma to build a strong relationship with them as a therapist, but then we take breaks in their lives as they need it. And then maybe in pivotal other teen years or early adulthood, when they're entering into trying to help healthy relationships, I see them again. You know, so there's these phases you need to help somebody. It doesn't have to be all the time, but it is a journey. It's a healing journey. Some people need to find what will help them, but it should never just stop. So
I want to add a little to what Erin just said. So she said that oftentimes it's a parent or a friend. 93% of the time, statistically, it's a parent or a friend. 93%.
So now you that grief too.
Yeah, that's brutal. And then Kevin was talking earlier about the effect that it has long term. And there in 2017, there was a small study in Canada. And this was the first generation of kids who had grown up with their child sexual abuse material on the internet. And they were now young adults. 60% in that group had attempted suicide. And so I'm just like, you know, this is not just a get the guy in jail thing. This is a much longer term deal. So while we're all doing our part, there's huge implications for society all along the way through here.
Yeah, and someone asked a great question in chat. They asked if we had gotten 2020 numbers yet. And I'm going to assume you mean 2020 numbers as far as CSAM goes, or CSAM growth. The answer is no. We don't have accurate numbers yet, but the early indicators show us that since the beginning of COVID, the rate has increased almost twofold.
Yeah, we're anticipating, twice. So.
Yeah, it's horrific. I mean, you can only imagine that COVID has not helped the situation at all, right?
Remember, a lot of these kids were handed Chromebooks that never maybe even had a computer in their house before.
Right.
So that's not always going to lead to good things.
Yeah, we've actually seen where kids, and going back to these missing kid investigations, they're being told to wipe their phones. I don't know how many investigations that we've jumped in on where the phones are wiped, batteries pulled, it's thrown away, not anywhere around. You can't ping it because it's not on anymore. They've been instructed on what to do.
Right.
But when we go back and look at their school accounts, we start seeing, in not every case, but in some cases, we'll start seeing where they're communicating over the school network, or they're going to the library and communicating over that because the parents are monitoring them at home, with no privacy or anything like that. But yeah, a lot of times we'll see that it is somebody known to that family, known to that child, if it's not the parents themselves.
Yeah, monitoring definitely has value, but it's nowhere near as valuable as learning to talk to your kids.
Yes.
It's 101 parenting.
Always a balance, just like everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But what you were talking about is so important for childhood. The concept of childhood has become such an important thing in my head that, these kids are losing what little childhood they have 1 second at a time, right? Every second of abuse, there's more of it gone. They'll never get that back. And when you grow up without childhood, that's you can never be a full person like you would. And that's something we really need to keep in mind. We need to save childhood now for the next generation.
Yeah, that's a wonderful quote. I'm going to be using that moving forward. We need to save childhood now for the next generation.
Hurry, somebody clip it.
It's on Twitch. We got it. We'll be able to go back and grab it.
Twitch clip.
But that's the
Levy.
That's the reality of it. That it's a thing that will stick with the victim forever. I think that often gets forgotten as soon as the guy gets behind bars.
Yeah, and the limits to law enforcement, it's really hit me over the last 10 years or so is we get the recovery, and that child will be sitting there in our lobby, and we're kind of done. Like, who's going to come pick this kid up?
Mm-hmm.
We're looking to the next one. And I think that's one of the places that we really need people stepping up. We need we need funding on that. We need funding ourselves, but they need funding. They need something to give these kids hope, to give them something where they can develop and they can have a safe place.
Nah, I think that's great. And so we've hit 7:46, so we are officially starting to wind down. But I wanted to give everybody an opportunity. If there's anything that you want to say to our audience right now that they can leave with, that'll stick with them, what's the one thing that you want to communicate to them before everyone logs off for the night?
Well, I guess I'll start. The one thing I want is, there's that concept of pay it forward. And I think even if you don't have anything to pay forward, get it started, but don't overlook things. See where you can improve the life of somebody else, even if they'll never know it, even if they can never pay you back. And maybe if they can't pay others back at the same level, see how you can improve somebody else's life. I think that's one of the big things that we should be doing.
I think that's great. Branzetti?
I'm kind of stumped on this one. I had so many different things in my head, but look, Kevin said pay it forward. I'll go with you can make a change in things. So we talked about a whole bunch of things tonight, the problems that exist out there. It's educating your local politician, right? The dollars have to come to places. Police departments, tell me one police department that publicly talks about this kind of stuff in their stats. They talk about homicides, rapes, robberies, burglaries, car thefts. Car thefts are very important, But these are the things, the stats that get a police commissioner hired or fired. They don't talk about this. We don't like to talk about this because it's an ugly world, but we need to. And the only way we can make a change in this world is educating people. And for any individual person, it's the local politician, the local police commander, and say, what are we doing about this? And when a couple of people, 3, 4, 5, 6 people get in somebody's ear, that's a little bit of change.
Very nicely said. Very nicely said. Yeah. So thank you guys both so much. Thank you, the Kevins, Kevin Metcalf, Kevin Branzetti. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And just as a reminder for everybody, please go check out ncptf.org. It's ncptf.org. If you type in !guests, it'll be a link for you there. And please go see more of what they do and how they're making a difference. So we love these guys, and it was an honor to have you guys with us tonight. So thank you very much. And as always, if you want to learn more about the Innocent Lives Foundation and our mission, you can visit us at innocentlivesfoundation.org. So thank you all very much for tuning in. I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thank you to all our donors tonight. Very much appreciated. This needs to happen for everyone. So thank you.
Thank you all for having us on. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
We always love working with you guys.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for being here. Won't be the last time.